Hello everyone, here is our first installment of the year, 2015-2016 AP US History at Floral Park Memorial. So, as you can see, we're starting out with quite a topic here. Our 40th President, Ronald Reagan, a man whose name was mentioned quite often last night in the Republican debate on CNN. He is a president that, for some people, is the greatest leader we've had, at least in the modern era, and for others, somebody that they think is incredibly overrated for his record. I will do my best to present you with the facts and the details about his presidency. We're going to do some activities in class as well. As always, if you do have any questions, jot them down, email them to me, text them to me on Remind, send it on Schoology, ask me in class the old-fashioned way, any way you'd like. But as you can see from the pictures here, I tried to get a little bit of a cross-section of Ronald Reagan's persona. Yes, he was an actor prior to being a politician, and I will tell you a little bit more about that in class. One of his more famous lines, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Reagan often gets credit for ending the Cold War, and I really think this quote up here, which I'm not pointing to right now, is the primary focus of his 8 years in office. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. And that is a very conservative mindset in which we want to have this little government involvement in people's lives to free them up to pursue greatness. So Ronald Reagan, again, just somebody that really captures so much about the American spirit, but also really does divide people. And I just want to keep emphasizing that to you. So how did this all happen, the Reagan Revolution? Well, in 1980, Ronald Reagan won the presidency over Jimmy Carter, pretty much in a landslide. Now, what was happening in the 1970s? Well, first, I will let you know, Reagan did run for president in 1976, and he would have been on the wall in my classroom, except for the fact that I was 5 years old at the time. And he went for the nomination against Gerald Ford. However, he did not win the Republican nomination. I always find it fascinating that we have a president who's considered one of our more popular individuals who couldn't defeat, in 76, a president that's considered one of our least successful. Timing is everything. But in 1980, Jimmy Carter was faced with numerous foreign policy issues. He's also dealing with a very difficult economic time, and the people were looking for, as you can see from Time magazine, a fresh start. So he ran on a conservative platform. The key aspect of his platform was tax cuts. We want to try to stimulate the economy by providing people with more of their own money. He did want to make cuts to some government programs for various social programs. But he also wants to add money to the military budget, and that's because we were involved in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And lastly, there is a more traditional sense of our cultural values. There's a more conservative movement of the moral majority, which that I'm going to teach you in class later on. I did right here, Reagan asked the television audience, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And the day Reagan was inaugurated, January 20th, 1981, on that day, Miss Canone was born, Miss Francis was at the inauguration, and our hostages who were being held for 444 days were released. Quite a day. So now what is this idea of Reaganomics? This is absolutely the most important slide here. Please listen carefully. With the 16th Amendment in 1913, we instituted a graduated income tax, meaning that on your income, depending on what bracket you were in, you would pay a certain percentage to the government. Now, that number has fluctuated all throughout the years, and it was actually as high as 90% at times. For the purposes of this explanation, and again, I'll do this more in class, today, under Barack Obama, the highest tax bracket is 39.6%. The next bracket is 35%. Then we go to 28, 25, 15, and 10. We have 6 different brackets. The more you make, the higher the bracket you are in. For purposes of discussion or hopefully understanding, some of the candidates for president now want to go to 3 tax brackets. That's actually Jeb Bush. Some want to go to 1 tax bracket, just a flat tax. Others want to go to more, the Democratic side, want to go to more tax brackets. Some want this number increased. Some want it decreased. When Ronald Reagan was president, he inherited, remember, when you become president, you don't change everything on the first day, although some of them think they can. In Reagan's first term, he inherited a top bracket of 70%. Not until 1986, 6 years in, was he able to then lower that top bracket to 28%. This is the idea of supply-side economics, trickle-down economics, tax cuts for the rich so that there's more money to spend, and eventually that will trickle down to the lower classes. So as you can see on this sarcastic cartoon, some people don't believe in this economic theory. Others believe that it stimulated the growth that we enjoyed in the late 80s and early 90s. And if you're going to ask me which is the right answer, I won't tell you, simply because I don't know. It is economic theory. It's for you to decide if you think it's better to cut taxes and allow people to spend more money, or if you think it's better for the government to have more money and use that for a variety of programs and infrastructure. But I hope you understand the concept of Reaganomics and what he was trying to do. There is no question he was a significant cutter. That did not make sense. There was no question he significantly cut taxes during his presidency. However, I always like to emphasize this. To say that Reagan cut all taxes is not accurate. There are 3 taxes that he actually increased as president. He increased the tax on cigarettes. He increased the tax on gasoline to help pay for the highway bill. And I emphasize this because Congress has not raised the gasoline tax since Reagan, and there are people today who feel as if, well, not that they feel, the highway fund we have, it's going to run out. So there are some commentators who are asking Congress today to do what Reagan did and actually increase that tax. And the last one that he increased is a tax on Social Security. When you start working, there will be a small Social Security tax that you will be paying. That will go into a giant fund for the government, and the government will then use that money for when people turn 62. They could wait until 65 or 67, but they will get checks from the government. Well, people are concerned that as we're living longer, that this is going to run out. So some people think we should do what Reagan did, and that is increase the Social Security tax, but that has not really been on the mind of any of the Republican candidates in 2000 and for the 2016 election. So I hope you all understand this Reaganomic concept. Again, we have plenty of time in class to go over it, but it has to do with supply side economics, cutting taxes largely on the rich so that it will trickle down and help stimulate the economy. All right. Now, just a sampling of other things Reagan did while he was president. He tried to reduce regulations of business. The conservative idea is to leave business alone. You probably know this as the phrase, I was hoping that didn't happen. You probably know this as the phrase laissez-faire. That's a very conservative concept, and trying to promote more industry in the country. One of his more controversial acts was when air traffic controllers, the people that make sure that the planes don't crash into each other in the air, went on strike. And he threatened to fire them if they did not go back on the job. I believe he gave them 48 hours. They did not settle the strike, and he did fire them for what he perceived to be violating their contract, and started to train and replace them with other workers. Reagan appointed the first female to the Supreme Court. Her name was Sandra Day O'Connor. She's no longer on the court, but she's doing an awful lot of work on education of the Constitution. She actually has created a website, iCivics, where kids can go on there and play games and learn about the Constitution. Now, 4 years later, Reagan easily defeated Walter Mondale, as you can see from the map here, and campaigned on the pledge that it's morning again in America. So, and I will tell you about his persona in class, but he's just a very upbeat, optimistic, witty type of personality in the White House. And then one of the saddest things that happened during Reagan's presidency, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. I was in 8th grade at the time, and I do remember this because we were watching it in school. And one of the people, one of the astronauts that died was a teacher who was Christy McAuliffe. To make sure I got the name. All right. Now, as far as foreign policy for Ronald Reagan, we are at the end of the Cold War, this long decades of ideological struggle with the Soviet Union. And he referred to the Soviet Union as the evil empire. So in order to try to win this war, Reagan increased spending on the military. And his idea was that we will try to weaken or cripple the Soviet Union's economy, that they wouldn't be able to take care of their own people economically if they're spending money on missiles. He did put a lot of money into the Strategic Defense Initiative. This is a system which we were supposedly able to shoot down missiles with lasers and a force field. Critics called it Star Wars. I've had students in class debate whether or not we have this still today. I don't even know the answer to that. He did, to show the strength of the United States, he did invade a small island called Grenada, concerned that there might be a communist type of a revolution on that island. And one of the worst events foreign policy-wise for Reagan was in Lebanon in 1983. We had 2 separate terrorist acts that led to almost 300 Americans killed, and he did remove our troops from that country. And lastly, many people do give Reagan credit for winning the war, even though the fall of the Berlin Wall happened under President Bush, his vice president. Many people give Reagan the credit for that. So it looks like I have 3 minutes, and I was going to go through what is a very complicated incident during the Reagan presidency, and it's known as the Iran-Contra Affair. It's going to require me to draw a little bit. I don't want you to be too intimidated by my artistic ability, but this is the United States, this is Central America, and this is the Middle East. And let's do the best I can here. So during the 1980s, there was another group of hostages who were being held in the Middle East. They were being held in Lebanon. And I don't want you to get confused, but during the 80s, we really had an awful lot of situations like this, with various planes being hijacked, embassies being attacked. And this was a series of hostages that were, again, during the Reagan administration. At the same time, there was a country, Nicaragua, that was having a civil war. The Contras versus the Sandinistas. Now, this civil war, the Sandinistas were the communists. So since it's the Cold War, we like the Contras. So the Reagan administration wanted to fund the Contras. So they went to Congress and asked if we could have money, because only Congress can authorize that type of funding. And in what was known as the Boland Amendment, Congress said no. Congress declined to authorize funding these rebel groups in Nicaragua. So that's the outline of what I'm about to explain to you. Now, somebody or several people orchestrated the following incident. Somebody's knocking on the door. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, so somebody orchestrated the following. A secret plan, or several people, in which there was a war between Iran and Iraq, 2 countries that do not get along for a variety of reasons. We sold weapons to Iran. Again, this is all secretly. We sold weapons to Iran so they can defeat Iraq. Why would we sell weapons to Iran? Because the Iranians, I know you might be saying, isn't this the country we're having problems with today? Iran said that if they received these weapons, they would get the hostages in Lebanon released. And that is exactly what happened. So the hostages were released. Everybody's celebrating in the United States. We are unaware, as the public, that this took place because of this secret sale of weapons to Iran. Now, where does Nicaragua fit in? I told you we sold weapons. Since we sold them, you also get money in return. And we took that money and we diverted the money to the Contras. Mission accomplished. So either you think this is one of the greatest plans that any presidential administration has orchestrated, or you think it's a blatant violation of the Constitution. And I would love to keep talking about this, but I'm trying to keep it at the 15 to 18-minute window. So I've given you a nice little overview of Reagan and something for us to build off of in class. Be ready to ask questions and have a good day.